In nature, manta rays organize into groups called squads in order to feed off of plankton. Well, Mana Network's massive squad of supporters are hungry and looking to ensure their DeFi transactions stay completely private. Hi there, and welcome to the Parachain Auctions podcast hosted by Kraken. I'm Brian Hoffman, crypto platform product lead, and I'm glad you could join me out here on the cutting edge of crypto technologies. On this show, you'll hear from leaders and innovators around the world building parachains on Kusama and Polkadot. Tune in for insights from the best and brightest about their new projects. Whether this is the first you've heard of parachains or you're a DeFi aficionado, come with us behind the scenes as we explore the technology of the future today. Today, we have with us Kenny Lee, COO and co-founder of Manta Network. Welcome back to the show, Ken.
Thanks. Glad to be back.
Yeah, I think it's been quite a while actually since we had you on to talk about Calamari, but I'd love to get a little bit of an update on how things are going. You guys won the 7th auction, I believe, on Kusama. Pretty amazing. I think there was something like over 16,000 wallet addresses that contributed, which is just massive. And obviously, I think some of those addresses are probably exchanges, which means there's many more people behind that. How has it been for the team?
It's been a long process. After winning the Parachain, I think what people don't realize is that that's when the game actually starts. Because now you've got to start deploying. And so we've made a lot of progress on Calamari. We've done, I think, about 3 or 4 runtime upgrades already. We had a little bit of a kink in the way. As you probably know, right, Calamari, we did a community fair-based launch, which implies that, there were no team tokens, there were no investor tokens. And so everything was kind of distributed to the community. And so when it came time to our first runtime upgrade, we had this funny little problem where when we had to do the upgrade, we had to pay gas fees on our own network, right, in KMA, our native token. But we don't have any team allocation, so we didn't have any native tokens to pay the gas fee. And so we couldn't do the runtime upgrade immediately. We had to go through parity governance to make sure that we could unlock some small amount of tokens for ourselves just to pay the gas fees. And so that was an interesting experience in just like thinking about a community-based launch. And so if anything, this is more of like advice to other future Parachain projects for community-based launches. Make sure to save a little gas fee for yourself.
It seems like something that you would think about beforehand, but there's always things that get swept under the rug, or you forget, or you don't think
Too
about.
many
But
things going on.
It's interesting. In previous times, it's just so easy to just change code or do whatever you want to do. But with the way that the governance works now, it's like you have to go through this process. Speaking to that, I know that the governance process has seemed to work pretty well on Kusama and Polkadot so far. But I mean, do you find that it hampers your progress, or do you think it's something that you guys actually value greatly because now there is more of like a community driven approach to this?
Yeah, I think community has been something that we've really been focused on since day one, right? And this upcoming runtime upgrade that we're doing with our chain is going to be our first governance-enabled runtime upgrade. So it's our first official, community-based runtime upgrade. But even before that, right, I think the numbers that you mentioned earlier about the 16,000 unique wallet addresses, right, I think that really highlights the enthusiasm from our community. And just as a track record, right, even before we enabled on-chain governance, we've been very, I guess, adaptive to a bunch of the suggestions from our community, right? We are pretty active on our telegrams, learning from the community, because at the end of the day, we are a small team. We're doing many things at once. And so, we don't always come up with the best ideas. And so when we actually talk to the community for feedback, I think we actually get much better results, and we see a lot more responsiveness in things. Like, for example, our Polkadot Parachain auction, right? We started that off with a pretty similar strategy as we did with the Kusama auctions, which was a fixed ratio of rewards, right? And then, getting a bunch of community feedback, the general sentiment was you guys should think about restructuring your rewards for the community. And then, I personally jumped on probably like 5 or 6 different calls with different community members who did a bunch of different analysis on, the reward systems. And at the end of the day, we changed it based on community feedback. And this didn't require any on-chain governance, but it just highlights that, we are very focused on like hearing our community feedback. So we're definitely looking forward to on-chain governance and really formalizing this sort of relationship.
So a lot of people kind of speculated that because the size of the Polkadot network was just so much larger than Kusama, that there would be kind of this like almost level of magnitude greater interest and hype around Polkadot parachain auctions. Have you seen like any growth in terms of like your community's passion and fervor for like what you guys are building on Polkadot versus Kusama, or do you think it's just a continuation of the excitement that you've already seen?
Yes, I think it's definitely a continuation. What's really interesting is because I don't know if I don't remember if we discussed this earlier, but our Kusama ecosystem community and our Polkadot ecosystem community are kind of diverging, right? So, like when we talk about, because at the end of the day, right now, Manta Network and Calamari Network's upcoming products in the short term are the same, right? Apart from like a logo change and a name change, everything else in terms of the underlying code is the same. And so we are so used to talking about it just in the sense of Manta Network. But when we talk about Manta Network, we also imply Calamari, right? But what we saw after, our Kusama ecosystem grew was there were people who came in who had no idea what Manta Network was and only Calamari. And so they would be confused why we don't talk about Calamari at all. And so now that we are taking that step into the Polkadot ecosystem, all the community members from the Kusama ecosystem, we're bringing them into the Polkadot ecosystem as well with our crowd loans. And so people are starting to understand more about Manta Network as well as Calamari Network and the relationship between the two. And I think people, so to answer your question, right, I do think it's kind of a continuation in that sense. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why you should have gone with calamari and fish sticks as your other network name, and then maybe people would have correlated those closer. No, but seriously, so on your crowd loan currently for Polkadot, you guys have had about 3.5 million dot contributed already, and you guys are right up there at the top. We've had two winners so far, but it seems like there's some competitiveness. I think for the next three or so. How are you guys anticipating the winning going? Do you think you guys have a chance for the fourth slot or the third slot, or are you just kind of like waiting for whenever it happens?
I think we're definitely going for the fifth slot. I think right now, right, what's really interesting is that the competitive nature of the first 5 batches has actually gotten our community a lot more fervorous around the parachain auctions than before. I think, in the Kusama auctions, we had an advantage in our lead, just because, we had started a little bit before the auction actually started. And so I think there was a little bit of a different perspective from the community in the sense that, oh, we're in the lead, we should maintain our lead, right? But like now with the parachain auctions on Polkadot, right? Like we are head to head. And so the community is very, I guess, hungry or hungrier. And so we see a lot more activism in the community in that sense. And apart from that, right, like I think we're definitely in a very good position to be one of the first 5 parachain slots. And so, like we still have a long way to go before the fifth parachain auction, and there are still some pieces in place or pieces that haven't fallen in place. So yeah, we're definitely looking forward to that.
Nice. This is kind of a fun thing, but like I guess while the parachain auctions were kicking off, I think the whole world pretty much became enamored with the Netflix series Squid Game. And I heard that you guys did some kind of promotion or something around the hype with that show. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what that was.
Yeah, so Squid Game, well, I won't get into Squid Game, but we had a similar event called Squad Game. And Squad Game was our token event for Manta Network. And so, just FYI, right? Like a group of manta rays are called a squadron, and so that's why we called it the Squad Game, right? And then also, squad and squid and calamari, there's just a lot of sort of associations. And so we just wanted to play on that. But it was our public token event. And, that was I guess that was the first opportunity for our community to start I guess, getting a hold of our tokens. They haven't been launched yet, right? Like we're still in the process of getting a parachain, but once the parachain launches, right, like the that will be the first token distribution.
That's awesome. Yeah, I coming from a company named after an octopus, I probably should know more about squids and their migratory habits, but ashamedly I don't. But so I noticed on your Twitter feed too that you guys are hiring. There was a call out for hiring people. How big is the team now, and where do you plan to grow to?
Yeah, we are. There's 17 of us, of which 15 of us, 14 of us are all on the engineering side, and so we've been historically very engineering heavy in our recruitment. And so right now, as we are getting closer to launch on the Polkadot parachains, and we are at launch on the Kusama parachain, we are starting to or not refocus, but also expand our team more on the business strategy, marketing, partnerships, development as well. That being said, right, we are still very actively hiring engineers as a layer one protocol. We need network engineers, DevOps, Rust engineers, and obviously the full stack in the front end as well, just to create the user experience. So yeah, we are very actively hiring right now.
Well, that must be exciting. I know getting fresh blood into projects is always exciting. You get like new people in that have different expertise, and it really motivates the team. So, for folks that don't really know a lot about Manta and Calamari, because this network is like very privacy focused, a lot of cryptography, based work. And I'm sure, like you said, you've been hiring a lot of engineering talent that probably focuses on that, and that's hard to do on its own. But it sounds like you're got it maybe starting to shift and put some more energy around marketing and promotion to the community. I mean, how do you balance those two things? I mean, a lot of projects really like to focus just on being the best engineering project that they can, but these require like an all-out community management, marketing and advertising. It's like a true business, but you're also running it as like a decentralized network. Like, what are some of the challenges around that, and what have you done to kind of get past them?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it really is a balance, right? Because like our team's working around the clock, 24/7, very hard. Each person probably does like 3 to 5 people's jobs right now, and so that's why we definitely need to expand the team in all aspects, especially on the business side. But with that being said, right, like yes, we are very focused on delivering product, and that's why our engineering team is so, or our team distribution is so heavily weighted on engineering. But what we realize is that we have to stay in communication with our community as well as the entire ecosystem. Otherwise, people don't know what we're up to, right? And when we stay silent, then people just think we're not doing anything. And so, we definitely have to open up that channel of communication. And as our community is growing larger and larger, right, that channel also has to grow larger and larger. Otherwise, people are trying to look for information in different sorts of media, and they can't really find it. So they start wondering what we're actually doing. And so I think like at the end of the day, the goal of getting these new hires more on the business side is to make sure that we have a clear communication with our community.
That's great. So let's talk a little bit. I mean, we talked a little bit about the makeup of the team, but I'd love to talk about the product a little bit. We actually didn't really kind of recap on what Manta and Calamari are to begin with. We had a whole another podcast, and for those listening, they can go and find the Calamari podcast we did to get some more in depth details on it. But maybe you could just synopsize like what it is real quick for us as we go in to talk about the product.
Yeah, sure. So, we have a few different products coming out. The first one being MantaPay, and Calamari's network is MariPay. And that is our private transacting service. And so, the way that you can think about it is we're all familiar with Zcash, Monero, privacy tokens, right? Manta Network, or Calamari Network, or I guess specifically here we're talking about Manta. But Manta Network, we don't have a privacy token. We're building a privacy utility to allow other parachains within the Polkadot ecosystem to privatize their tokens. And so that's kind of a difference here, right? So with MantaPay, what we want to be able to do is allow someone to say, oh, I want to transact, I don't know, 10 dots in a privacy preserving manner, right? They can privatize the dot and transact that to whomever they want. Um, And so it's not like our token itself is a private token, right? Our token is actually a public token, which you can privatize just like any other parachain asset you can privatize. So that's our first product, right? And as we continue to do this with different parachain assets, we are going to be introducing our swap functionality as well. So we are building out a private AMM DEX, and that's something that we've been, pretty heavily focused on the research side so far. But as Manta Pay starts becoming mature and the testnet comes out this month, then we're going to be shifting focus to primarily engineering for Manta Swap as well. And so that is our private AMM DEX. It allows you to keep your identity private and continue to swap for various parachain assets. From there, right, we are pretty interested in the idea of creating tiering completeness on top of our ZKP environment. And so what that implies is, building different decentralized applications using, smart contracts. And I don't think I mentioned this last time, but our technical co-founder Shumo, he he worked at Algorand before he decided to work on this project with us, and he actually built out the whole smart contract system, or was working on the smart contract system for Algorand. So it's a little this type of stuff is definitely up his alley.
That's really interesting. Yeah, we had a good talk with several other teams that are building parachains, and obviously everybody has their own approach. I mean, many of them are kind of bringing the Ethereum virtual machine over and just kind of using that, and some are like just kind of not really focusing on that much at all. But that's really interesting around Algorand, the smart contracts, and bringing that. I think that opens up a lot of opportunities. Did you ever consider kind of just adopting the Ethereum virtual machine approach, considering that so many software tools could be brought over very easily, sort of like what we're seeing with Moonbeam, or was that kind of incompatible with the kind of approach that you're taking around privacy and anonymity to begin with?
Yeah, I think definitely the former, right, as you described, because being able to be as close to compatibility with the EVM is kind of the gold standard, right? Because now you can allow different projects to easily deploy on your environment as well as other environments, and so that kind of obfuscates the layer one, and that reduction of friction allows projects to come on to you guys or come on to us as quickly as possible, and that's exactly what our goal is. We want to make it frictionless.
So the product that you mentioned, Manta Swap or Mari Swap on Kusama, is sort of I don't know. I guess you could probably dumb it down by saying it's similar to Uniswap for folks on the podcast that aren't super familiar with all the different swap products out there. But one thing we're seeing in that space is that there's this kind of nervousness or instability around how are regulators going to look at these tools? Like, are they going to require some kind of KYC AML strategy for the front ends for these products, or are they going to ask for that to be more ingrained into the protocols? Like, how are you guys thinking about that, and are you preparing for that kind of possibility, or are you just thinking that you'll just kind of defer to the network for the community to figure out some of these solutions?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna pretend like I can dig into the regulators' heads and figure out exactly what they're thinking. But we are very conscious about it. We are definitely taking a proactive stance and trying to figure out ways that we can be balanced on both ends. Right. For example, for our private transaction and private swapping service. We are allowing, or we are enabling, a feature for self auditing, right? Because it is a decentralized network, there is no sort of privileges that any user has over others, including ourselves, right? So it's not like we can go in and see everyone's transactions. And so in a decentralized network, we have no authority over anyone else for that. But what we do allow users to do is their own self auditing, so that they can properly report their trades, their transactions, etc. And I think that's a first step in the right direction. But I think it's also an indicator that we are trying to be as conscious as possible about the regulatory and compliance side as well.
And these kinds of products, I mean, at this point in time, it seems almost like it's a commodity rather than something really unique. I mean, it seems like almost every network has a swap marketplace of some sort. But what sets Manta Swap, you know, what makes it special compared to some of the competitors? Is there some unique special sauce that you guys are building into Manta Swap that makes it more compelling to use? And how are you encouraging more people to be interested in that?
The privacy layer. So I think that's where the real sauce comes in for us. I mean, overall, because we are very focused on privacy, and you think right now, right, like it's becoming more and more of an issue in terms of privacy when it comes to any type of transaction on chain. I like to give the analogy of like, I can't see your credit card information, I can't see your transactions, and but with Web3, right, as long as I can dox your address, then I can see all of your activity in all the wallet interactions that you've had, all the different smart contracts that you've interacted with, right? And like, this may not feel like such a problem right now just because the space is so nascent and applications are still developing, use cases are still developing, market share is still developing. But when you think 3 to 5 years from now, right, with more mature applications, varying use cases, right, like privacy is definitely going to be a concern, and it's not unique to just decentralized exchanges. I think it's unique to just your on-chain identity overall, and so decentralized exchanges and privacy around that is really just the first step for us.
So in terms of like the privacy piece of this, I mean, are you worried that people will not understand how to use these technologies? I mean, privacy and security tools are kind of notoriously things that like slow people's experience down rather than like make them more streamlined. And people often try to circumvent them rather than adopt them. I mean, how do you educate and encourage people to consider these benefits more closely and choose these over other options?
Yeah, so I'll take a pretty controversial approach on that and say that it's not that privacy is hard to use. It's just that privacy has been designed in a way that makes it hard to use, right? And I think the biggest example here is, post internet after GDPR. With GDPR afterwards, every website you visit, there's like that tag that says like, "Oh, accept all cookies" or "do this," right? And so you've got two options. The first one is a very simple button that says "accept all cookies," which is what the website wants you to do, so they can collect your data. And the other option is go through all of our list of different cookies and try to figure out which ones you want and which ones you don't want. Right. Like, I mean, if the user experience was designed differently to say, like, don't accept any cookies or select the ones you actually want or are okay with, right? I bet there would be a lot more privacy in that sense, right? And so, I only say that to say that I don't think that privacy is hard or should be hard to use. It's just designed that way, because data is digital gold. At least in Web 2.0. And Web 3.0, I think we have that opportunity to change that. And so that's exactly what we're doing. And I think one of our focuses is to make privacy as a utility, right? Along that 3 to 5 year timeline about Manta Network, we do see ourselves as more of a middleware. And so what I mean by that essentially is, people on within the Polkadot ecosystem should be able to privatize their assets, transact their assets, swap, interact with different applications in a privacy preserving manner without having to know that it's Manta Network underneath as the layer, right? They should just be able to toggle on and off privacy through their wallets, through different applications, just like how you open up your laptop and you can connect to the internet, but you don't have to worry about who your ISP is, right? You can turn on your faucet, water comes out. You don't have to worry about who your utility vendor is. Same with privacy on Polkadot, and so that's really the user experience we're envisioning, and I think that will reduce a lot of the friction for people when they're thinking about how they can, transact in a privacy preserving manner that doesn't affect how they interact with applications on a daily basis.
One of the things that's come up lately that's been pretty problematic is that people are really getting into NFTs, for instance. And one of the biggest issues with it is that people want to promote that they have these NFTs. They're like sharing which ones they own in order to prove that they own these things. But in a way, it's kind of also doxing a lot of what they own, right? Like, I mean, you can go to a wallet address and essentially see all the NFTs that they own, and then they get targeted, and a lot of people get these things swept out of their wallets because they don't know what they're doing. I mean, how do you think privacy and security and anonymity fits into the whole move towards the metaverse? I mean, I hate to think that like Facebook or Meta now is like the only option people have to kind of enter the metaverse and protect themselves. I mean, like, how can they? Like, are you guys starting to think about how things like what you guys are building could play a part in helping protect people that want to participate in the metaverse?
Um, yeah, so I think like one of the key points here is, with privacy, it doesn't mean that you can't prove that you own something, right? And I think that's the entire value proposition of zero knowledge proofs, that you can prove something without actually having to reveal what that something is, right? And so I can prove to you that I own this NFT, but that doesn't mean that the record of me owning that NFT is exposed on chain. And so I think there's definitely sort of that opportunistic play for privacy when it comes to NFTs, metaverse, et cetera. But also the other thing I want to point out is optionality, right? Like privacy doesn't need to be like an ultimatum, right? It doesn't have to be required in order to use a network, but there should definitely be that optionality whether or not you want to toggle it on and off. And so if you want to transact NFTs in private, then you should be able to. I think that's kind of like a fundamental human right. But if you want to keep the transaction public and you want to show off your collection, then more power to you as well.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think it is a little bit. It's funny. I get flashbacks to like when I first saw the original Matrix movie, like going into like this virtual space and like not being able to trust what you're seeing or what you're interacting with. I think the problems that we have already in the real world seem like they're going to be magnified when we start going into these like virtual spaces, and now we have privacy coins and currencies. I mean, how do you see us still establishing trust between one another in these kinds of environments when we spend so much time trying to hide what we're doing? Do you think it's really just mostly about focusing on proof of ownership and just being able to trust the transactions themselves, or do you think that there's some more important like identity component that's probably still missing here that we haven't cracked?
When it comes to identity, one of the things that I like to think about is the idea of, traceability of your identity. And when it comes to optionality of privacy, that could limit the traceability of identity, but it doesn't necessarily eliminate the traceability. So limitations, but not elimination, is I guess one analogy is like squeezing the toothpaste, right? Like, and this is something that I heard from, an interview with Secret Network, another privacy sort of layer ecosystem, and the guy gives a really good analogy of squeezing the toothpaste, where your identity, right? Like every time you squeeze the toothpaste, you're letting out a little bit more information, but when you can't put the toothpaste back into the tube once it's already available, then you can't really figure out exactly what people are going to do with it, but there's no way that you can, bring it back in. And I think that's kind of like a good statement for Web3, especially because of the immutability aspect of blockchain. But exactly how that affects identity and the piece of identity that we're missing and how it'll impact, future, I don't know, malicious activity or data collection or surveillance. Who knows? But I think at the end of the day, it's all about having the optionality of privacy still. I hope I understood your
Yeah, no.
question correctly.
Sometimes I don't understand my own questions, but the conversations are always super intriguing, and I love to hear what you guys think about stuff. So let's get back to the Polkadot auctions real quick. So we have seen something like 100 million Polkadot locked up at this point in crowd loans, which is just incredible. And
Yeah.
and some people I've talked to think that that's low compared to what they expected. Some say that's like high. To me, I just think it's just either way. It's a resounding support level for clients to be like putting that much of their crypto at stake to support product teams. What have you? How has that shaped how you guys thought about like the cap level for your auction and any of the other kinds of like parameters that you put in place around your auction itself? Like, did it change the way that you guys thought about approaching this compared to Calamari?
No, not really. Right. Like I think Holistically, the numbers I think are more indicative of the utility of the of dot, right? I think it's a perfect use case, and I think one of the greatest use cases so far, because you're no longer thinking of it necessarily as a speculative asset, but you're using it as a tool to help projects launch within an ecosystem that you believe in. But locally, right, we don't really necessarily think as strategically about the total value that's been locked up so far as we do about trying our best to just you know secure a parachain.
Yeah. Well, and we just started describing this as like locking up your coins, and what we're seeing right now is that a lot of the product teams are allowing the creation of these like liquid tokens, so that you're not really like locked up in your crowd loan per se. What is your perspective on the idea around kind of providing more liquidity to people? Obviously, it's a huge commitment to lock up your coins for 2 years. Who knows what will happen between now and then? Do you think it's a good or a bad thing that that we're finding ways for people to kind of exit those positions somewhat?
I mean, I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, but I think it'll be an interesting thing, right? Because like the liquid tokens that you create, or the liquid tokens that have been created or will be created, they exist in a different market than the actual tokens themselves. And so, I think there's a lot of interesting new opportunities that arise. Just the fact that there are already, liquid versions of the tokens is already an interesting opportunity. But the further opportunities there, it could imply potential for like price prediction, arbitrage, right, based on different liquidity pools of different liquid dot. So at the end of the day, I think it's going to be interesting to see the types of tools and activities that people come out with these sort of like smaller pools of liquid dot. But whether it's a good or a bad thing, I have yet to formulate an opinion on.
So now that we're getting a little bit closer to like all of your products like being a reality and like being out there in people's hands, I mean, are there some things that you didn't expect to happen that were especially challenging? I mean, I know you guys said that you had the you had to pay the gas fees with your own token earlier in the chat, but are there any other things that you kind of came across that weren't ideal for you and your project that you had to solve as you guys are getting closer to like rolling it all out?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the technical side, there hasn't been any major road bumps. There have been kind of minor inconveniences, but apart from that, right, nothing out of the ordinary. One minor trivial inconvenience was, our original ticker symbol for Manta was MA. And that kind of was a double entendre because it also stands for Massachusetts, which is where the founders met and got to know each other. But interacting with some parachains like StateMine requires a ticker symbol of at least 3 characters. And so we had to just, change our ticker symbol to Manta. It's an example of a trivial inconvenience.
Yeah, I think we've come across all kinds of different issues related to like nuances, but it's like as people create more things, they're always trying to change it and break the standards. So it's not something new, I'm sure.
Mhm.
Um, so one question I wanted to ask you too about this, that when I was talking to you about Squad Game, actually the idea came up around like what kind of partnerships and team ups are you guys planning? Like, are there other projects in the parachain space that you guys are working with? Are there any upcoming events or anything that you're planning, collaborations with these groups, or anything you can share
Yeah.
with us?
Yeah, I mean, I can't share the specific names right now, but I will say that, as the parachains are maturing, projects are starting to launch. I think the next shift that we're all starting to focus on is cross chain communication, XCM. And so, that's exactly what we're starting to do with various projects. And so there's a lot of opportunity there for privatizing various parachain assets, right, through XCM. And that's something that we've I guess worked on in the past in testnet with projects like Akala, right? But now we're actually moving into the big leagues.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So One of the big things around parachains that I think has been really important for the success of the communities is education and like letting people understand or helping them understand more about what it is you're trying to do, why it's important, and how they can participate. What are some of the resources that you guys are putting together to help your community really become more involved and become more educated
Educated around specifically our project, or more so around the crowd loan?
about the project?
Yeah. So, well, I guess the first and foremost is our documentation and our GitHub. So all of our code is open source on the technical level, right? And so before we release any project, we definitely want to make sure that everyone has access to all the code, so they can do self auditing and make sure that whatever we're building is I guess trustworthy, for lack of a better term. But that's really on the technical level, right? Like on a more community basis, on a higher level of communication, right? We do have weekly calls with our community on our own Telegram channel. And this is more of an AMA style, where we probably spend the first 25-50% of the time talking about updates that we've had since the previous week. And then spend the rest of the conversation just answering community questions. And I think that brings a lot of clarification to the community overall.
Definitely. So what are some of the problem areas that you guys would love to have more support from in terms of contributors and maybe people who are applying to the project to work? What do you guys need more help around?
Um, all of the above. We've got a great engineering team, and they're extremely talented. We've got a lot of work to do, so we need to expand the engineering side, and then on the business side as well, right? As I mentioned, the communication, we definitely want to streamline that a little bit more, and also kind of increase the faucets, and I guess, for lack of a better term, in terms of like being able to communicate effectively to the community, so that everyone understands exactly what's going on at the right time. So yeah, I mean, help on both the project side from a technical as well as a business perspective, right? Essentially all of the above.
So I saw that you guys are pushing towards something called the Dolphin Testnet, or I'm not sure if you guys have already launched that at this point or not. What is that, and how is that? What part of the process is towards pushing towards mainnet? Is that for you guys?
Yeah, so it's definitely an important aspect for mainnet. So we call it the Dolphin Testnet because it's actually a testnet on its own sort of environment. So it's not exclusive to Kusama or Polkadot. And the I guess with our testnet, our goal is to try to get as much QA testing as possible from the community, as much feedback from the community as possible before we launch mainnet, so that we can have that improved UI UX experience, right? But when it comes to launching mainnet, there are a few other things that we need to do before we can, I guess, comfortably launch it. One of which is the auditing. And so, because our auditing process is a little bit different in the sense that, one, we're not a smart contract. And so it's not really solidity based. But two is that we also are working with zero knowledge proofs. So we need auditors who have specific experience in cryptography. And so, we've secured a partner there, and we'll be working on the whole auditing process with them. But we need to get that done first, which we anticipate would probably take about a month to a month and a half. And so there's the testnet QA, there's the security auditing, and then there's a thing called ceremonies, which are pretty kind of unique to the zero knowledge proofs. And so it's essentially a fun little community event where everyone can participate in this, I guess, activity. But it probably takes about like a month and a month and a half to entirely complete. So, with that roadmap in mind, I think between testnet to mainnet launch, we're probably looking at around like Q1 or late Q1 to early Q2 for Calamari.
So working on a project that's so focused on security and privacy, and obviously, like you just mentioned, there's a lot of like cryptographic components to the whole thing. That ecosystem is pretty like there's a lot of scrutiny on projects that try to like rewrite cryptographic modules or like algorithms and like really do interesting novel things with cryptography. Like I guess like the usual saying is like if you got to write cryptography, like just don't. leave it to the experts. Have you found it difficult to do this project without receiving like a lot of like harsh criticism from like cryptographers or people in the security research space, or do you find them like really helpful and like interested in what you're doing and helpful like in terms of fixing things or coming up with new ideas or ways to improve the project?
Yeah, I think it's definitely the latter. A lot of the experts in the space that we talk to, they're very interested in what we're doing, and we've onboarded quite a few of them as advisors, and with their help, we've been able to improve a lot of our systems. Right. So, for example, with Manta Pay version 1 that we built is with burner addresses, and so what we essentially mean by that is like they're one-time use addresses where you send from one to another, and then with the help of some of our advisors on the team, we were able to create a system where it is permanent addresses. And so you're able to use the same address over and over again, but still preserve that same level of privacy, right? And so that's just an example of highlighting, we do find a lot of support in the community. I think people in the cryptography space are very interested in what we're building out, and they can be pretty engaging hands-on in a very positive way. And with that being said, right, like I don't think we're trying to reinvent the wheel here, right? Like the what we're using, right? We're using Groth 16 implementation of zero knowledge proofs, and it's pretty standard. I think we're taking a very practical approach of applying ZKP, and I think because of that, that allows for our, I guess, advisors and other cryptography enthusiasts to really come in and say, oh, if you're using this standard implementation that we already are very familiar with, you can think about like this way of doing it, right? And that way itself is not really novel in itself. It's just a different way of applying it.
Well, this is really cool. This has been a great conversation. I always am fascinated with your project because just because I've dabbled in my past in cryptography and encryption and security, and I think it's super important. It's something that I think is undervalued, underappreciated. So I really, thank you for coming on today and sharing a little bit more about Manta Network with us and the listeners. And where can folks go to learn a little bit more about Manta and Calamari?
Yeah. So I mean, if you don't want to get too technical, the first thing you can do is just go to our website, manta.network or calamari.network. You can join our communities on Telegram. It's t.me/Manta Network Official. If you do want to get more technical, I'd say, definitely check out our white paper. It's extremely technical. And our GitHub, all of our code is open source. But yeah, I think the best place to ask questions and communicate with us is on our Telegram channel, because that's where a lot of the core team actually hangs out as well. And so you'll probably get a response from one of us.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of places and opportunities for people to get involved and support you guys outside of just the crowd loan as well. Obviously, if that's all you could do, then that's great as well. But really exciting. And thanks again to our guest, Kenny, for coming on today and helping us learn a little bit more about Manta, Calamari, and all the exciting things that his team is doing. Thanks again to our guest, Kenny from Manta Network. We learned a ton about their Parachain auction bid and how they're working hard to keep DeFi transactions private. Make sure you like, subscribe, and review us on your favorite podcast platform, and we will be sure to bring you along as we get a backstage pass into the world of Parachain auctions. This content is not financial or investment advice. All interviews and discussions are opinions only. Kraken does not endorse the accuracy of this content. None of the following information should be construed as a recommendation to support any specific Parachain project or to participate in Parachain auctions in general. See our terms of service for more information.